Hi students, welcome back to the video lecture on software engineering. So till now we have already discussed so many things like software processes, types of software processes, there are different types of software process model also. We have been discussing the different phases what are include the software processes for which we are going to develop the software. So in case of software processes, there are two types of software process. One is your plan driven process and another is agile process. So today's class we are going to discuss what is that agile method, why we need that agile method. Take an example. Suppose we are using WhatsApp now, we are using Paytm now, we are using PhonePe now, and we can earn something by using those PhonePe, those Paytm, those YouTube, those WhatsApp. So if we are using those softwares now, that means some years back someone thought to develop that software. So take your consideration into WhatsApp. WhatsApp is not a small software. It is actually a vast software. We are using the WhatsApp for chatting in groups, for chatting with our friends, for video calling. But there are so many features beyond that. So when someone thought to develop or someone thought to create an application like WhatsApp, that time if he was used a plan driven model, then that will take some more time. Today's WhatsApp is completely different from last 2 years WhatsApp. That time the WhatsApp has some basic features like chatting, like audio calling or audio recording or putting your status. But now the WhatsApp has been changed. There are group calling, there are video chats, there are audio chats, there are group chattings. You can add 2000 participants in a group. There are the features that you can put your status for 24 hours. So or you can take the consideration into Facebook, your Insta, your YouTube. So there are many features with that software. So what actually we need? We need to change our software in day by day. Every day we are adding some features to that software. So for the rapid development, for the rapid delivery, we need the agile method. We have some plan driven model, that is your waterfall model is a completely plan driven model. But what is the problem with that plan driven model? If we will develop a project or we will develop a software by using the plan driven model, then we should know all the requirements at the beginning. After knowing all the requirements, only then we can go for specifying those requirements, then we will go for designing those requirements, then we will go for implementing the system. Suppose I am developing a software, I will get all your requirements at a time. Then I will go for specifying those requirements. Then I will go for developing or designing the system architecture for your requirements. Then I will go for implementation. After I will done my coding, you just come and you will tell me, ma'am, I need some changes into the software. Then that time I should tell you, no, I cannot accommodate your requirements, as I have already completed the coding phase. If I will go for accommodating your changes, then I should go back to the requirement phase. There I need to change the requirement, then I will go for again the design phase. But actually in real scenario, our environment is changing, our business needs are changing day by day. So we need the software very rapid delivery and we need the software for developing rapidly. So for that reason we have the new technology, that is agile method. So let's see what is the reason for why the agile method has introduced. So the main reason for the agile method is rapid software development. The first one is why we need rapid development and delivery. Because our business operates in a fast changing requirement and it is partially impossible to produce a set of stable software requirements. So as our requirements are changing day by day, there are different stakeholders who are involved directly or indirectly to the software. So their requirements are changing. Every day their requirements are changing. But practically we cannot accommodate all those changing requirements into our software if we will use the plan driven model. And the second thing is, software has to evolve quickly to reflect changing business needs. So this is two reasons why we need the rapid software development. The first one is the business operate in a fast changing requirement. That means we are working on a changing requirement environment. And second thing is, we need to evolve our software quickly to reflect the changing business needs. And the third one is says that plan driven development is essential for some types of system but does not meet these business needs. What we have already discussed when we have some advantages and disadvantages discussion on plan driven model, there we have already discussed that the plan driven model is essential for some systems, like for government projects, for larger projects where we need to keep in the account that the design and the specification should be there if we are working on some larger projects, because if some changing requirements will be arise after some years, then we can accommodate those changing requirements by looking at the design and the specification, those documents. So we should keep all those documents with us. So that is why we need the plan driven model. But when we need to accommodate the business needs, that means suppose for organization we are going to develop a software, so that organization expect to deliver the software in a very quick manner. So that time if we will go for plan driven model, so that is a failure, or we can take 1 to 2 years to complete those software, but the organization needs those software with the less number of time. So we need to follow the Agile method there. So after the 1990s, the Agile development method has emerged, and whose aim was to radically reduce the delivery time for working software system. As we have already discussed, in case of Agile method, we are developing the software in some increments and we are deploying those increments to the customer. So that means we are reducing the delivery time. Yes or no? So what actually the Agile method is? The Agile method is, we don't need all the requirements from the beginning. We can collect some requirements, we will work on those requirements. That means we will go for fulfilling those requirements in terms of software. Then we will provide those increments or those initial versions to the customer. The customer will use that. Then we will again collect some other requirements. Then we will go for work on that. So in the incremental manner, we can develop the software. We are not going to develop the software as a whole. We are going to develop the software part by part, increment by increment. As you people are preparing for your exam, you will go for first unit, then second unit, then third unit. Actually what you people are doing, suppose you have already covered the unit 1. So you have some priorities on different units. The unit 2 is important, so I should first go for the unit 2. The unit 4 is important, then I will go for unit 4 after that. So like that, as we are developing the software and we know that what is the customer's priority. According to the customer priority, we will go for developing the software. And this rapid delivery is actually highly needed, because if you go back to 2015 or 2010, that time we did not know that we can book a cab through some apps like Ola, Uber. So we didn't know that. Even we did not know that we can order some food by sitting at our home and by using some app. But now you can take 2020 January, we didn't know that we are going to teach you online. We people are going to read something, or we people have some digital classes. So you can guess how this technology is changing, how we need the technology. Other fields like your construction, like factory, like your banking, they are working from 100 years, but the IT industry is new. That means for last 30 to 40 years we are working on IT industries, and now the trending industry is what? The IT industry. So if we are from IT industry, we should know what is agile development. We should know what is my business requirement, what actually the organization expect from us. The organization expect the rapid delivery or the rapid development of the software. If we will go for rapid development of the software, then we will able to deliver the software very rapidly. So this is what the reason for agile methodology. So next, have a look into what is actually the agile development. The first one is program specification, design and implementation are interleaved. So this has been already discussed in the incremental delivery. The problem specification, the problem design and the implementation, they are interleaved. So what is that interleaved means? In case of plan-driven model, we are specifying whole system. We are designing the whole system and we are implementing the whole system at a time. So that is straightforward. If I am using waterfall model for developing a software, so while I am on testing phase, that means my coding has been done. That time if my customer wants some changes, I can't go back to the specification. There was no provision for going back to the specification. The requirement engineering is an iterative process, but we can go to the design process once my requirement process has been complete. So if I am on coding phase, I can't go back to the design phase, or I can go back to the requirement engineering phase. But in the incremental delivery, which is actually a agile process, there we are going for specifying, design and implementing for some part of the system. Then we will go for again the specification, the design, the implementation for the second part of the system. So while we are on the design phase, we can go back to the specification phase. Suppose for version 1, we will go for specification, then we will go for design, then we will go for implementation. Implementation means what? We will go for developing and testing. We are going for coding that system. Then after the coding or after the testing, we will deploy that version to the customer. The customer wants some changes. So what actually we did? We will go back to the specification for the version 1. That means after deploying the version 1 to the customer, if my customer wants some changes, I can go back to the specification or design of that version 1. So that is what the agile methodology. The specification, the design and implementation, they are interleaved. Two-way. We can go to the specification, to the design, and we can come back to the design, to the specification. But in case of plan-driven or waterfall, we cannot go back to the previous phase. So this is what the agile method is. The next is the system is developed as a series of versions or increments with stakeholders involved in version specification and evaluation. So we have already discussed that actually. So who are the stakeholders for the software? The stakeholders means any person who is directly or indirectly involved with the software development process. The stakeholder may be the software developer, the stakeholder may be the system architect, the stakeholder may be the client manager, the stakeholder may be the customer, the stakeholder can be the end user. So there are different stakeholders. So in the agile method, we are going to develop the software as increments or as versions. We will go for first version, then we will go for designing the first version, deploying the first version, then we will go for second. So there the stakeholders involvement is important. We need to involve our stakeholder with us. But in case of plan driven, once we got all the requirements from the customer, then we will again face the customer after the deployment of the software. After completion of the software development, we will go for deploying the software to the customer. That time we will again face the customer. So there the customer involved in two phases. The first phase is requirement specification. The second phase after deploying the software to the customer. But in case of Agile method, the customer involvement is more. The stakeholders involvement is more. Each and every version is given to the stakeholder. The stakeholder will give some feedback. Then we will go for second version. So when we will deploy the second version, that means we must integrate the first version with the second version. Then we will go for deploying the second version. So there actually the stakeholders involvement is important. We cannot develop the software without having the stakeholders involvement. And the third one says the frequent delivery of new version for evaluation. Obvious, if we are developing the system as a series of version or increment, then obvious we will go for frequently deliver of new versions. Next, extensive tool support, that is automated testing tools used to support development. So what is actually that? What is extensive tool support? So as we are dividing the system into different versions, that means we are testing more. The first version will get tested. The first version will be integrated with the second version and the new system will be get tested. Then after having the second version, then we will go for the third version. The third version is individually get tested. Then the second version and third version will be integrated. They will be get tested. So actually testing is more. So it is not possible for the software developer to test each and every version manually. So there should be some automated testing tools. That tools helps the software developer to test each and every version. Like there is the J unit, that is Java unit. So that tool is responsible for testing the Java programs. So like that there are so many automated tested tools. Those help the software developer to testing some individual versions or some integrated versions. And the last one says minimal documentation and focus on working code. So in the Agile method, we are not focused on the document. We will go for directly the coding. We are not going to specify the requirements. We are just want to know what my customer is required from the software. Then we will go directly to the coding. We are not going to design the software. We are not going for system modeling, system architecture. We just ask our customer what is your needs. So after getting some needs, after getting the priorities, then we will go directly for implementing the system. That means we are going for coding directly. So these are the methodology what actually we are using in Agile development. So look at this figure. This is what the difference between the plan driven and Agile development. So the first figure is plan based development. The second one is Agile development. So what I have already told you that the plan based development is straightforward. We will go for requirement engineering. The requirement engineering is the iterative process. So this is what we are mentioned here. This is the iterative process. After requirement engineering has been complete, then we will go for requirement specification. That means we have the document. So this oval symbol means we are processing here. This rectangle symbol means we have some output. That means we have some document. So after getting the requirement specification document, then we will go for design and implementation. So this is actually a iterative process. Design and implementation has some more phases. Then we will go through those phases. And once my design and implementation has been done, then we will go for testing and deploying the software to the customer. But in case If there are some problem or there are some error in the design and implementation phase, or the customer wants some changes, then we will go back to the requirement engineering. So this is what actually requirement change request. If customer request for some requirement change, then we need to accommodate those customer requirements. So we need to go back to the requirement engineering. We can't go back to the requirement specification, and we can't modify the requirement specification documents. So what actually we need? We need to go back to the requirement engineering. There we should follow all those iterative process, those requirement illustration, the user requirement, system requirement and all that. There we will change, then again we will go to the requirement specification. So what actually it is, it will double our work. So this is what actually the plan based development. But in case of agile development, the requirement engineering, then we will go for design and implementation. We can go back to the requirement engineering, again we will go for design and implementation. We don't have the requirement specification here, because as we have already seen that the minimal documentation focus on working code. So we are focused on working code. We don't have some documentation. We have the minimal documentation with us. So that's why we don't have the requirement specification here. We will take some requirement from the customer. We will go for design and implementing those requirements. Then again we will go back and collecting some requirement from the customer. Then again we will go for design and implementation, and like that we will develop the software in terms of different versions or increments. So let's see what is the plan driven development. A plan driven approach to software engineering is based around separate development stages with the outputs to be produced at each of these stages planned in advance. So plan driven development means when we are going to develop the software, we need to plan everything. What we are going to do in the specification phase, what we are going to do in the design phase, what will be the output of the design phase, what we are going for coding, what are our testing plans. So all these plans should be defined in the beginning of the development process. Once all my plans are set, I know that what actually I am going to do, then only I can go for developing the software. If my plan has not complete, so I can't go for developing the software. So before going for developing the software, we need to fix all these things, what actually I am going to do. So this is the plan driven model. So not necessarily waterfall model is the plan driven, incremental development is also possible. So incremental development can be the plan driven model, can be the agile method. So when we have discussed the process models, we have all seen three models: waterfall model, your incremental model and reuse software engineering. So waterfall model is completely plan driven. Incremental model can be the plan driven, can be agile. If incremental model is plan driven, that means we need to plan for each version. We have to plan everything. For the first version, what we are going to do, for the second version, what we are going to do, for the last version, what we are going to do. If we will plan everything and then we will go for developing, that is the plan driven. But if we will go for developing some instant version, we are not planning anything, we will directly go for coding. So that will be the agile development. And your last one is iteration occurs within activities, that we have already seen here. This is the plan based development. So here the requirement engineering is the iterative process, the design and implementation is also iterative process. So by completing all those iterative process, we will have the requirement specification with us. But in the agile development, the specification, design, implementation and testing are interleaved, and the output from the development process are decided through a process of negotiation during the software development process. So here in the Agile development is not straightforward. The Agile development is two-way. We can go for specification, we can go for design, we can go for coding. Actually, we are not concerned about the specification and design. We are going directly to the coding part. Then we will go for testing and deploying the version to the customer. So this is the difference between the Agile method and the plant-driven model. So this is the basics of Agile method. Why we need the Agile method, why the Agile method is emerged, what are the difference between the plant-driven and the Agile method. So in our next class, we will go for the principles of Agile method. Have a great day. Thank you.